You're lying in bed. It's 6:47 in the morning. Your alarm went off 14 minutes ago. And somewhere deep in your chest, you feel it. That quiet, hollow ache. Not pain exactly. More like emptiness. Like something inside you is screaming, and you've gotten so good at ignoring it that you can't even hear it anymore. You scroll your phone, check Instagram, watch someone else's highlight reel, put the phone down, pick it up again, and then you get up, brush your teeth, make your coffee, go to work, come home, watch Netflix, go to sleep, wake up, and do it all over again. And here's the part that no one talks about. Here's the part that keeps people up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling. You know. You know you were made for more than this. You feel it in your bones. You've always felt it. But somehow, somewhere along the way, you stopped reaching for it. And now you've built this whole comfortable little life around not reaching for it, and it's slowly destroying you from the inside out. What you're experiencing right now has a name, and it's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's not a character flaw, it's an epidemic, a silent, invisible plague spreading across the entire modern world. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it is, where it came from, why it has such a terrifying grip on you, and most importantly, how to finally break free. But I have to warn you, some of what I'm about to tell you is going to be uncomfortable. Some of it might make you angry. Some of it might make you want to turn this off. Don't. Because what's on the other side of this discomfort is the version of you that you've been waiting your entire life to meet. Let's go. The year is 2010, San Diego, California. A 25-year-old man walks into David Goggins' office. Now, if you don't know who David Goggins is, he's a former Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, Air Force TACP, and one of the most mentally brutal human beings alive on this planet. A man who ran 100 miles on broken feet. A man who holds the world record for pull-ups. 4,030 in 17 hours. A man who has looked death directly in the eye so many times that death started flinching first. This young man sits down across from Goggins, and he starts talking. He says, "David, I've been trying everything. I can't lose weight. I don't know what direction to take my life. Some days I think I want to join the military. Other days I think I'll open a gym. Sometimes I think about starting a business. But nothing ever works. Nothing ever sticks. I just feel stuck." Goggins leans back, looks at this kid, not with pity, not with sympathy, with something far more powerful than both of those things combined. He asks a few quiet, pointed questions, and within 5 minutes, Goggins later said he knew exactly what this young man's problem was, and it wasn't his weight. It wasn't his career. It wasn't his plan, or his lack of one, or his direction, or any of the things this kid thought were the problem. The real problem? This man had quit on himself. Somewhere along the road, maybe in childhood, maybe in a failure that cut too deep, he had stopped believing he could face hard things. Every time something got difficult, he pivoted. Every time the pain showed up, he found the nearest exit. Every time a challenge stared him down, he blinked first. And now, after years and years of doing that, his confidence was gone. Not missing. Gone. Hollowed out. Goggins called it by its real name, mediocrity. Not average performance. Not just being okay. No. Mediocrity as a mindset, a psychological disease, a way of moving through the world where you've pre-decided that comfort is the goal, that survival is success, that existing is the same as living. And here's the terrifying part. That young man's story, I want you to think about it for just a second. Does any part of it sound familiar? We live in a world that has been carefully, systematically engineered to make you mediocre. Think about it. From the time you were a kid, what were you taught? Pass the test. Don't fail. Get a safe job. Don't take risks. Be realistic. Be reasonable. Don't stand out too much. We teach kids to aim for the passing grade, not the mastery. We train adults to find comfortable employment, not meaningful work. We reward compliance. We punish ambition. We celebrate fitting in and quietly shame everyone who dares to want more. And then we wonder why an entire generation feels empty. But here's where it gets scientifically fascinating. And honestly, a little bit scary. There's something happening inside your brain right now that explains all of this. Neuroscientists call it the limbic system. It's the oldest part of your brain, the primitive part, the part that was built not to make you great, but to keep you alive, to keep you safe, to conserve energy, to avoid anything that feels dangerous. And your limbic system is absolutely terrified of growth. Every time you think about doing something hard, starting the business, having the difficult conversation, waking up at 4 a.m. to train, your limbic brain fires off an alarm. Red alert. Danger detected. And it whispers to you in the most convincing voice you've ever heard. This isn't necessary. You're already tired. You can start tomorrow. It's too cold outside. You've done enough. That voice isn't wisdom. That voice isn't your friend. That voice is a biological holdover from an era when your ancestors had to conserve every calorie because a saber-toothed tiger might be around the corner. There is no tiger around the corner. But your brain doesn't know that. And every single time you listen to that voice, every single time you hit snooze, every time you skip the workout, every time you settle for less than what you're capable of, you're not being lazy. You're being a slave to your own biology, a prisoner of your own nervous system. And mediocrity, average, ordinary, just getting by mediocrity, is just a fancy name for that slavery. But wait, it goes even deeper than that. Stanford neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman recently revealed something that stopped me cold when I first heard it. There's a region of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Researchers studied this region across thousands of people. Athletes, soldiers, sedentary individuals, people struggling with obesity. And they found something extraordinary. In people who were physically inactive, who consistently avoided challenge and discomfort, this brain region was smaller. In elite athletes, special forces soldiers, people who regularly pushed through pain and resistance, this brain region was larger. And here's the part that should absolutely shatter your world right now. This region doesn't just reflect your discipline, it creates it. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex is essentially your willpower muscle. And like any muscle, it grows when you stress it, and it atrophies when you don't use it. But here's the kicker. Here's what made scientists do a double take. This region gets bigger specifically, and only, when you do things you don't want to do. Not things that are hard, but exciting. Not challenging things you enjoy. Things you actively don't want to do. When you take that cold shower you've been dreading. When you make yourself read when you'd rather scroll. When you run that extra mile when every cell in your body is begging you to stop. That's the only time this region grows. Which means every time you avoid discomfort, your brain is literally, physically shrinking. Let that sink in for a moment. Your comfort is costing you your mind. Now I want to take you somewhere. I want to take you to a single night that changed everything for one man. And I promise you, if you pay close attention to this story, it will change something for you too. San Diego. Night. December. It's cold. Not California cold. Cold cold. The kind of cold that bites. David Goggins, no special preparation, no support team, no crew, decides he's going to run 100 miles. 100 miles. In 24 hours. Now, at this point, Goggins was already a Navy SEAL. Already one of the toughest human beings on the planet. But 100 miles in a day, with essentially zero preparation for an ultramarathon? His fellow SEALs thought he'd lost his mind. Even his closest friends thought he'd lost his mind. He didn't care. The first 12 hours? Incredible. Almost surreal. Goggins runs with this kind of savage, effortless power. By the halfway point, he's already covered 70 miles. He's ahead of schedule. He feels invincible. And then, mile 70. Everything changes. He looks down at his feet. His white socks have turned completely red. Not faintly red, soaking red. The blisters on his feet had burst so many times, they're no longer blisters. They're open wounds. Every single step is like pressing a hot iron directly into raw flesh. He goes to the bathroom. What comes out is not urine, it's blood. His kidneys are beginning to fail. His lungs are starting to fill with fluid. The bones in his feet, the small, delicate bones that carry all your weight every time you move, are fracturing under the accumulated stress. Every doctor on site comes to him and says the same thing. Stop. Right now. Or you will die. And something happens in Goggins's mind in that moment that I want you to understand deeply. Because this is the whole thing. This is the entire lesson wrapped in a single human moment. He sits down in a chair. He's shaking. He can barely breathe. And his mind, the same mind that got him through Hell Week, through Ranger School, through every brutal thing the U.S. military could throw at a human being. His mind starts to break. All the motivational quotes he'd ever heard, gone. All the positive self-talk, all the you can do it mantras, all the inspirational speeches, completely useless. When you're in real darkness, not Instagram quote darkness, not motivational poster darkness, but actual, physical, your body is shutting down darkness. None of that stuff works. Goggins sat in that chair for 4 hours, crying, shaking, arguing with himself, trying to find one single reason to stand back up. And every reason he found, another part of his mind shot it down. I'm doing this for charity. His mind said, nobody risks their life for charity. That's not why. Stop lying to yourself. I want to inspire people. His mind said, no, you don't. You're in agony. You want this to be over. Stop performing. Everything false inside him burned away in that fire. And then, in the deepest silence of that broken moment, something surfaced from beneath everything, something raw, something that didn't need a reason, something that existed before logic, before language, before thought. He said to himself 4 words. I am a savage, not as a pep talk, not as a mantra, as an identity, as a statement of what he fundamentally was at the core of his being, stripped of everything soft. And in that instant, adrenaline flooded his system like a switch had been thrown. The pain didn't go away. The broken bones didn't heal. The bleeding didn't stop. But the bearer of that pain had changed. He taped his feet, stood up, and started walking. Mile 71, mile 80, mile 95. And when he finally crossed the finish line, 100 miles, Goggins later said something that I think is one of the most profound observations about the human mind ever articulated. He said, "I learned that night that my mind had been lying to me my entire life. Every time it told me I was done, I wasn't done. Every time it told me I couldn't take one more step, I could take 1,000 more. My mind was protecting me, but it was protecting me from the very things I needed most." And out of that night, the 40% rule was born. The 40% rule. This might be the most important idea you ever hear in your life. Here it is, stated simply. When your mind tells you that you are absolutely, completely, utterly exhausted and done, you are at 40% of your actual capacity. 40%. That burning sensation in your lungs during a run, 40%. That feeling at night when you think you can't study one more page, 40%. That moment at work when you think you've given everything you have, 40%. 60% of you, an ocean of untapped human potential, is sitting there behind a door that your brain has locked. Not because you can't access it, but because your brain decided, without asking you, that you don't need to. That wall your mind puts up is not a physical wall. It's a security system. And you have the override code. The code is doing it anyway. That's it. That's the entire code. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic master, a man who led millions through war and plague and crisis, said it centuries before neuroscience had the language to explain it. He said, "The obstacle is the way." Not that the obstacle is something to overcome on the way to the destination. The obstacle is the destination. The resistance, the difficulty, the pain, the thing you're avoiding, that is where you become who you're meant to be. There is no other path. There has never been another path. Now I need to talk to you about something that's going to be uncomfortable. There's a reason you surround yourself with certain people, and it might not be the reason you think. Deep down, and I mean really deep, in places you might not even admit to yourself, many of us deliberately keep people around us who aren't doing much. People who are comfortable being average. People who aren't pushing themselves. People who won't challenge us. And we do it for one reason. So we can feel like the smart one, the ambitious one, the successful one in the room. It's a game we play with our own ego. We make ourselves the tallest person in the room by finding the shortest people we can. And it feels like confidence. But it's the exact opposite of confidence. It's fear wearing a costume. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most piercing philosophical minds in human history, saw this pattern and named it with devastating clarity. He said, "Become who you are, not who you perform, not who you pretend, not who you feel comfortable being. Who you are, at your absolute deepest, most honest, most stripped-down level." And Nietzsche understood something terrifying about that process. You cannot become who you are in comfort. You cannot find yourself at a gentle jog. The real you, the full, realized, maximum version of you, only emerges in the furnace of genuine struggle. Not manufactured struggle, not obstacle course weekends. Real struggle. The kind where the outcome is uncertain. The kind where you might actually fail. The kind where there is no safety net. That is where you live. That is where you become. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you were genuinely, truly happy? Not entertained, not distracted, not comfortable, actually deeply happy? Think about it honestly. I bet that moment, whatever it was connected in some way to growth, to doing something difficult, to getting to the other side of something that scared you, to becoming slightly more than you were. Because here's what psychology and neuroscience have figured out together. Human beings are not built for comfort as an endpoint. We are built for expansion, for growth, for challenge and mastery and forward movement. When those things stop, we don't settle into contentment. We rot. We feel it as restlessness, as vague dissatisfaction, as that nameless 3 a.m. ache, as the scroll through other people's lives trying to fill a void we don't even have words for. And here's the most heartbreaking part. That void, that emptiness, that hollow feeling, it's not emptiness at all. It's the gap between who you are right now and who you know you could be. It's the distance between your current self and your possible self. And the wider that gap grows, the more you avoid challenge, the more you settle, the more you choose comfort over growth, the more painful that internal friction becomes. You can feel it. You've always been able to feel it. And the scrolling, the junk food, the Netflix, the substances, the distractions, none of that fills it. It just temporarily numbs it. And when the numbness wears off, the gap is still there. Bigger, if anything. The only thing that fills that gap is growth. The only thing. There's an experiment, a scientific experiment conducted in the 1960s by a researcher named John Calhoun. And it's one of the most disturbing things I've ever come across. Calhoun built a paradise for mice. He called it Universe 25, unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect temperature. No predators, no disease, no threats of any kind. Everything a mouse could ever want, provided in abundance forever. You know what happened? At first, the mice thrived. Population exploded. They seemed healthy, energetic, alive. But then, slowly, like a tide going out, things began to change. The mice started becoming passive, listless, indifferent. Aggression broke out. Not the purposeful aggression of survival, but senseless, directionless violence. Mothers abandoned their offspring. Social bonds dissolved. Mice that had been born healthy began refusing to eat, refusing to mate, simply withdrawing. And then they started dying. Not from disease, not from predators, not from any external threat. They died from the absence of struggle. Calhoun called it the behavioral sink, the complete psychological collapse of a species that no longer had anything to overcome. And here's the part I need you to hear, because this isn't a story about mice. Look around you. Your couch, your streaming services, your food delivery apps, your constant connectivity, your endless entertainment. The fact that you can have almost any physical comfort delivered to your door within hours. You are living in Universe 25. Not as a criticism, as a fact. We have built, with extraordinary human ingenuity and ambition, a world so comprehensively comfortable that the very thing our brains require for health and meaning and vitality has been engineered almost completely out of daily life. The struggle that built us is gone, and we are in the behavioral sink. Depression rates, highest in recorded history. Anxiety, through the roof. A generation of young people who, by every material measure, have more than any generation ever, and by every psychological measure, feel worse. This is not a coincidence. Comfort is not killing us slowly. Comfort is killing us efficiently. So what do you actually do about this? Not just get motivated, not just believe in yourself, not just feel inspired for 48 hours and then go back to the same patterns. What actually changes a human being? Goggins gave us a framework, 3 principles, and I want to walk you through each one because each one builds on the last. The first principle, Make your goal terrifying. Not challenging, not ambitious, terrifying. If you can look at your goal and not feel your pulse quicken, if it doesn't make your stomach drop just a little bit when you really sit with it, then your goal is not a goal. It's a wish. It's a daydream. It lives comfortably inside your comfort zone. And nothing transformative has ever been born inside a comfort zone. Real goals should scare you. Real goals should make part of you want to laugh at yourself for even considering them. Real goals should make the person you are today feel inadequate. Because they're designed for the person you're becoming, not the person you are now. If you're not slightly terrified, aim higher. The second principle, the 40% rule in everyday life. You already know the concept. Now here's how to actually use it. Tomorrow, whatever you're working on. When you hit that wall, when your brain says, "That's enough for today, you've done your part," I want you to do one more thing. Read one more page. Write one more paragraph. Run one more block. Make one more call. Just one more. Not because one more will change your life overnight, but because every single time you do that, every time you go past the point where your brain told you to stop, you are physically enlarging your willpower muscle. You are training your anterior mid-cingulate cortex to be bigger, stronger, more capable. You are literally rewiring your brain. One more thing at a time. And I promise you that one more thing is what separates you from the version of yourself you're trying to become. The third principle, kill the victim. This one is brutal. This one is the one that people resist the most, but it's also the one that matters the most. Every story you tell yourself about why you can't, every "my background wasn't good enough," every "I didn't have the right opportunities," every "you don't understand what I've been through." I'm not saying those things aren't real. They may be completely real. The pain is real. The disadvantage is real. The injustice may be completely real. But here's the hard truth. The story you build around those things, the identity of victimhood you construct from your real pain, is a cage you build yourself, and you hold the key. Goggins grew up in one of the most brutal childhoods imaginable: abuse, poverty, racism, learning disabilities. By every external measure, the universe had lined up against him. Every excuse he ever needed was right there, fully justified, completely legitimate. He chose not to use them. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because he understood something that takes most people a lifetime to understand, if they ever do. Your problems are yours, and your solutions are yours too. No one is coming to save you. That's not a pessimistic statement. That's the most empowering truth that exists. Because if no one is coming, if you are the only cavalry that will ever arrive, then you have no choice but to become someone worth saving. And when you do that, when you take absolute, uncompromising ownership of your entire life, the good parts and the broken parts, and the unfair parts and the painful parts, something shifts. You stop waiting. You stop scrolling. You stop watching other people live. You start living. There's a practice Goggins used when he was at his heaviest, 300 pounds, deeply depressed, directionless, that I want to leave you with. Every night, he would stand in front of his bathroom mirror. Not to admire himself, not to give himself motivational pep talks, not to do affirmations. He called it the accountability mirror. He would look himself dead in the eyes, and he would tell himself the truth. Not comfortable truth, not kind truth. Raw truth. You're overweight. You're making excuses. You're wasting the one life you've been given. You're capable of so much more than this, and you know it, and you're choosing not to reach for it, and that is a choice. And choices have consequences, and you are living the consequences right now. Not to destroy himself, to wake himself up. Because here's what Goggins understood about self-love that our culture has completely backwards. Real self-love is not telling yourself you're perfect the way you are. Real self-love is caring enough about yourself, believing deeply enough in your own worth and potential, that you refuse to let yourself stay small. A parent who truly loves their child doesn't let that child give up every time something gets difficult. A parent who truly loves their child pushes them, challenges them, holds them to a higher standard, because they know what that child is capable of, and they refuse to let that potential go unrealized. You need to be that parent to yourself. The self-compassion industrial complex has sold you a lie. The lie that acceptance means staying where you are. That loving yourself means never pushing yourself. That is not love. That is comfortable neglect. Love yourself enough to demand more from yourself. I want to leave you with an image. Imagine two versions of yourself standing in a room. The person you are today, and the person you could have been. The person you could still become. If you stopped avoiding the hard things. If you stopped numbing the gap. If you stopped settling and started fighting. Now imagine those two versions of you standing face to face. How far apart are they? A few steps? A mile? An ocean? Because one day, and you don't get to know when that day is, those two versions of you will meet for the last time. And in that final moment, the only thing that will matter is whether those two people look the same or whether they're strangers to each other. The gap between them, that is either your greatest regret or your greatest achievement. And everything starts right now. Not when you feel ready. Not when the timing is perfect. Not when your circumstances change or your resources multiply or someone finally gives you permission. Right now, in the next 5 minutes. What is the one hard thing you've been avoiding? The one thing your brain has been whispering maybe later about for weeks or months or years? Do that thing. Not because it will feel good. It won't. Not because it will be easy. It will be the opposite. Do it because on the other side of doing it, a different version of you is waiting. A stronger one. A braver one. A more alive one. Do it because you are not a mouse in Universe 25. Do it because somewhere inside you, beneath all the comfort and the scrolling and the numbness and the avoidance, there is a version of you that is a savage, and it's time to let them out. The choice is yours. It always has been. End of script.